Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. Welcome to this video tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to draw a kawaii style ice cream in Illustrator. Before we get started in this video tutorial, let's look and see what it is that we're going to achieve. I'm going to show you how you can create this kawaii or cute ice cream cone illustration in Illustrator. And we're going to build up all the pieces for this illustration, including the pattern that is inside the ice cream cone, and we're going to do it in this video tutorial step by step. To get started with the project, I'm going to create a brand new document. It's going to be 1,000 points by 1,000 points in size and an RGB document, and I'll just click OK. Now we're going to create the ice cream standing up, and later on we'll rotate it into position. It's just easier to do it that way. The starting point is going to be the piece of ice cream on the top. So I'm going to select the ellipse tool and then fill the shape with the color that I want to use, at least for now. I think I'm going to make this a pink ice cream. And I'm just going to drag out something that approximates a circle. If I wanted a circle, I could hold the Shift key as I draw it. And then I'm going to add 4 other circles around the bottom of it. So I'm going to click again on the ellipse tool, and I'm going to hold Shift this time as I drag out 4 circles. Now if you want these to be exactly the same, you could just create one and copy and paste the others. But I'm not really that fussed here. Now I'm going to line them up, and I want them to be slightly overlapping. I don't want to see any of the underlying ice cream through here. So I'm going to move these all into position, and this is going to be my basic shapes. I'm going to select all of these shapes and I'm going to unite them into a single shape, and I do that using the Pathfinder tool. If you can't see the Pathfinder, choose Window and then select Pathfinder from the list. But my Pathfinder palette is open here and I'm selecting the Unite option. And that just gives me my starting piece of ice cream. Now, before I continue, I want to add a 3-point stroke to all of these pieces. So I'm just going to make sure that that has a 3-point stroke on it. The next thing to add is the piece of ice cream below this, and we need to make sure that we have plenty of room for the facial features to be put in there. So I'm going to do this using the pen tool, and before I go I'm going to select a different color so that we can clearly see what it is that we're working on. So let's use a sort of orange color for this. And I'm going to start here by clicking and dragging in this direction to start my curved shape in this direction. I'm going to move down here because I want to add a drip of ice cream. So I'm going to drag down to start and then up to finish the curve. And I'm going to do that all the way across, down and drag up. Drag down, drag up, drag down, and finally drag up to finish this shape off. I'll click in here and click back on the beginning. So this is my rough ice cream shape. It's a little hard to see how it's going to look because at the moment it's in front of the first ice cream shape. Well, if we reverse these 2 pieces, it's going to be easier to see exactly what we've got. And to do that, I'm opening up the Layers palette. If you don't have your Layers palette visible, choose Window and then Layers, or you can press F7. In the Layers palette, I'm identifying the top path in this layer 1, and I'm just going to drag and drop it below the other path, and that just reverses these 2 pieces, making sure that the piece of ice cream that we just drew is below the other one. It allows us to see things a little more clearly, and of course this is how it's going to look in the final piece of art. Now it's time to go and get the direct selection tool, because the direct selection tool allows us to locate the various anchors in this piece of vector shape here and to just reshape them. And so I'm just looking to just perfect this shape a little bit, making sure that I have plenty of room here for the facial features because that's where they will go. It's a good idea to use small numbers of anchors. We could have done a lot more anchor points here, but really you'll get smoother curves the less number of anchor points that you have. Okay, let's call that good for now. The next step is to add the ice cream cone, and again we're going to do that using the pen tool. I'm going to select a brown color for this, but still keep this black stroke. I'm going to click on the pen tool and I'm just going to start drawing. So my ice cream cone is going to start up about here. I'm going to drag down because I want to head in a downwards direction. For the bottom of the cone, I'm going to click and drag here, again dragging downwards. Now I want to curve around and head up, so I'm going to click and drag upwards to make the bottom of my cone. And then click up here to finish my cone shape, and then back over the starting point, and that creates a closed shape. Now, as we did previously, we're going to reorder these paths within the layer, and I'm going to target this ice cream cone path and drag it below the other two paths, because that places it in position behind the ice cream. It allows us to have a really good look and see how it is. And again, I think that I need to do a little bit more work in just isolating one or two of these points and just making sure that I've got the best shape that I can get. And when I'm done with drawing the ice cream cone, it's time to have a look at the crosshatch pattern that we're going to place inside the ice cream cone. And we're going to make our own pattern for this. To create the pattern, we're going to start with an unfilled shape. So I'm going to turn off the fill on this shape and just take the stroke. And I'm going to create a couple of lines that we can use. So I'm going to click on the line tool and I'm just going to click on my image because I want a 100-point line at 0 degrees of rotation. So I'll just click OK. And I'm going to do that again a 100-point line, but this time at 90 degrees of rotation. And all that does is give me two lines that are perpendicular to each other. I'm going to move the first line down on top of the second so that they intersect. I'm just going to make sure that they do intersect properly because this is going to be the corner of my shape. Now, if I go and change the strokes on these lines, they're going to work a little better. So with this line selected, I'm going to the Appearance panel, and you can get to that by choosing Window, Appearance. And I want to click open the stroke here, and I want to add my stroke as a projecting cap. And then I'm going to do that on this other line here. Select it and just make sure that it is also a projecting cap stroke. Now let's zoom back out. I'm using Control or Command 0 to do that. I'm going to select over these shapes, and I think I need to make them a bit smaller because I would like my pattern piece to be roughly the size that it's actually going to be inside here. So I'm going to select over these shapes and I'm going to reset the stroke width to 3 points because that's going to be consistent with the rest of this design. I'll select these two pieces and make a pattern out of them by choosing Object, Pattern, Make. Now I need to check and make sure that my pattern piece is working really well. So I want to just zoom in here, and my pattern piece is in here, and you can see that it's perfect. It's overlapping really nicely and we're not seeing any gaps. So if I'm happy with that, I can just click up here and click Done, and that selects that and creates that as a pattern piece. I can delete these objects, these lines, because I don't need them any longer because my pattern is over here. It's called New Pattern because I didn't bother giving it a name because we don't really need to because we're going to use it straight away. We're going to add it to the ice cream cone, so I'm selecting the ice cream cone, and again I need to use the Appearance panel because here I don't want to lose my brown fill, but what I want to do is to put a pattern on top of that. So what I need to do is to actually create a second fill for this object. So with the ice cream cone selected and the appearance panel visible, I'm going to click here on Add New Fill. It's possible in Illustrator to have multiple fills in an object, and by default this has just repeated the last fill. So I've got two brown fills on top of each other. Well, what I need to do is to make this one my new pattern. So I'm just going to click in here to select the pattern as a second fill. So we've got our brown coming from this fill and our pattern coming from this fill because we made a pattern that was transparent. There were holes in between those lines. Now everything's good except for the rotation because this pattern is vertical, and for an ice cream cone it would look a whole lot better if it were rotated. Well, we're going to click on this fill in the appearance panel, and to rotate it we'll choose Effect, Distort and Transform, Transform. I'm going to turn the preview on so that we can see what's happening as we work. We don't need to change the scale or to move this pattern, but what we do need is to rotate it, and we need to rotate it 45 degrees. So I'm just going to type 45 and then press Tab to move forwards. And you can see that our pattern has indeed rotated 45 degrees. Not quite as successfully as we might like it to have been, but yes, it did rotate. Well, the problem is that we rotated the object as well as the pattern. So if I just deselect Transform Objects, here is our pattern inside our original ice cream cone shape, and the pattern is now rotated nicely the way we expect it to be. Now before I leave this, I may just want to move this a little bit. You can see that the pattern is a little bit uneven down the bottom here. Well, let's see what happens if I move it horizontally a few points. Now it's a lot more balanced inside this ice cream cone shape. I didn't need to move it in both directions. I really just needed to adjust the horizontal here. Although if you need to move it vertically, you can do that as well. Now that we're finished in this dialog, I'll just click OK and click out of the way. So far we have our ice cream shapes and our cone. And it's time to go ahead and add the cherry on the top and the facial features. For the cherry on top, we're going to create that using an ellipse. I'm just going to click the zoom tool. Let's just zoom into the top of the shape so that we can work here. I'm going to target the ellipse tool and make sure that I'm filling this with a color that is appropriate to the cherry on top. Let's choose that red. And I'm going to hold the Shift key as I draw a sphere or circle that is about the right size, and I'm just going to move that into position. I'm going to lock it pretty much along the edge here as I like that effect. Now for my cherry I need a stalk, so I'm going to grab the pen tool for this. I'm going to turn off the fill because I don't need that and just use the stroke. I'm going to click and drag upwards here to start my curve in this direction, and I want to finish my curve over here because I want to sweep it around, so I'm going to click and drag here and then press Escape to finish working with the pen tool. Now this would look better if it had a rounded end, so with the shape targeted I'm going to click on its stroke, and this time I'm going to select a round cap, and that will give it a nice rounded end. Now in the cherry I'm going to do another little loop. So again with the pen tool I'm going to create this outside the cherry and then move it into position because it's a little easier to explain here. I'm going to click and drag downwards to start the curve, and then here I'm going to click and drag upwards to finish it. Now it's a little bit too much of a curve, so let's just go and get the direct selection tool and just tweak this curve a little bit. I think it could be slightly flatter. And when I'm happy with that, I'll choose the selection tool and just move it into position, and we're just going to place it right underneath the cherry stalk. And that looks good now. So let's go back out by pressing Control or Command 0. And we're ready to start building the facial features, the eyes and the mouth for our ice cream. The eyes are going to be created using filled circles, so I'm just going to switch my stroke and fill color so that I have a black fill and no stroke. And I'm going to target the ellipse tool, and again we'll build quite large eyes and just size them down. So I'm going to hold the shift key as I drag out a large sphere. Now I'm going to switch, and this time instead of a black fill, just actually going to click away from this shape so I don't fill that shape up, but I'm going to select a white fill because this is going to be the pieces inside the eye. Again, targeting the ellipse tool, holding the shift key as I do so, I'm going to drag out a reasonably large circle for inside this eye and then click away from it. And I can duplicate this circle by just clicking on it and hold the Alt key as I drag a duplicate away. And then I'm going to resize it by holding the Shift key as I just drag on its corner handle and size it down quite a bit smaller. So it looks like this. And now let's just position these two pieces relative to each other. This is going to be just below the previous white shape. And once I've got all of these together, I'm going to select them all, and because I want to resize them and move them all together, I'm going to group them. I'll choose Object and then Group. And now they'll all move together, but also they'll all resize in proportion. So I'm going to hold Shift as I drag down on the corner handle to create the eye now at about the size that I want to use it. And I'll move it into position. And then I need two of these, so I'm going to Alt drag on this to create a second eye. And there's my second eye shape. Now I can move these a little bit differently if I want to put them up a little bit higher. Now the mouth is just a little loop, again made with the pen tool. I'm going to target the fill color and make it black. In actual fact, I need a stroke, so I'm just going to flip these. So now we're working with a stroke and the pen tool. And I'm going to make this mouth out here and then move it into position. And it's just very simply click and drag downwards, and I'm going to drag pretty much vertically down. I can make sure it's perfectly vertically if I hold the Shift key as I do that. So I'm going to let go, and now I'm going to click and drag now perfectly upwards, again holding the Shift key as I drag to make a perfect little loop here. Let's target the stroke and let's go and get this shape. Now you can see here that the stroke width is just 1 point. This needs to be quite a bit thicker because it needs to stand out because it is a facial feature. And I also want to give it round caps so that these are round on the end and not sharp, not sort of blunt. And now we're ready to move it into position. And it goes between the eyes, just below them. Now if you want to, you can add cheeks, and this time I'm going to do some flat circle cheeks. So I'm going to target the ellipse tool and just drag out a very small flat ellipse, and I'm going to take down the stroke width on this to probably 3, maybe even 2, and then I'm going to drag it into position, and it goes just below the eye, and we need one on either side, so I'm going to Alt drag a duplicate away from the original so I get 2 of them. Just going to move that into position. So there's the face on our kawaii character. If you're looking for some additional sort of embellishments on this character, we could add some little filled circles. I'm going to target the ellipse tool and make sure that I'm using white as my fill color and black as my stroke, and I'm just going to drag out, holding the Shift key, a tiny little circle, and I'm going to select over it and then Alt drag to create a copy, and I'm going to create a few copies while I'm here. So I'm just alt dragging away from the original to make 7 copies, and I'm just going to now drag and place them in position on my ice cream. So they're sort of like sprinkles. And you could color the fill in them if you wanted to. But I'm just going to leave them plain. It's also possible to add a little bit of highlighting down on top of the cone, and you could do that again using the ellipse tool and again using these same settings. So I'm just going to drag downwards here to assemble the piece away from the shape. It's just a long, very narrow ellipse. Now I can go with the direct selection tool and just click on one end of this ellipse and then click up here on the convert selected anchor points to corner, and that just makes this end a point instead of rounded. Now if I select over this entire shape and go to stroke, I can select what the corner is going to look like. So if I want a rounded join instead of a pointy one, I can do that. And as I click away, you can see that it's a lot less pointy than it was before. Just going to move this into position here, and I'm going to rotate it because I want it to be along the line of the ice cream. And I think the very top here could be flatter, so I'm going to target it with the direct selection tool. I'm just going to zoom in so that you can see what I'm doing here. I have this particular point targeted, and all I'm going to do is drag the handle out a little bit on both sides, and that will give it a rounder top and a pointier bottom. And again, select it and just make sure that it's nicely rotated so it runs along the side of this shape. Now Control or Command 0 to move out. And typically when people use this kind of shading, it has a dot on the end. So again, I'm going to select the ellipse tool and hold the Shift key as I create a dot to go on the very end, and I'll just move that into position. Now if you're happy drawing these in place, you can go ahead and draw them in place. I just like to sometimes draw them to one side so I can make sure that they're all right, and just finesse them out to the side and then move them into position when I'm ready. So far so good. The original illustration that I showed you had a border around the outside, and we're going to do that next. To create a border for this shape, we need to create a shape that is the outline of this entire piece. So I'm going into the layers palette because I want to identify the pieces that are creating the outline for us. So I'm just going to size everything up just a little bigger right now, just so that you can see them a little more clearly. So these are all the circle pieces, and here are the ice cream pieces. So this one here is the cone, the one above is the orange ice cream, and the one above that is the pink ice cream, and together they pretty much define the shape. So with these all selected, I just shift clicked on each of them in turn. I'm going to make a duplicate by choosing Edit Copy and then Edit Paste in Place. And I've just pasted in place at the very top of this layer stack these 3 pieces, which are the exact same pieces as we used at the bottom, but I need these as a duplicate because what I'm going to do next while they're still selected is I'm going to join them all together. So with them selected, I'm going to click here on Unite, and that just creates a single shape that is the composite of all these shapes here. And I'm going to put it at the bottom of the layer stack. So I'm just going to make sure I can see everything nice and clearly. I'm going to take this path here and drag and drop it all the way at the bottom. So right now we're not even seeing it. If I hide it or display it, we're not seeing anything there. This is going to be the outside edge of our shape, and so what I want to do is just increase the stroke size on this shape. So I'm going to target the shape and I'm just going to increase the stroke on it. Now I've got the feeling that the stroke is on the middle of that shape, and so for every click of the point value I'm only getting half a point of extra stroke. So with this shape selected here, I'm just going to click on stroke and just see what's happening. Well, the stroke at the moment is aligned to the center of this shape. We're going to align it to the outside. And now you can see that it's a lot thicker. In fact, probably a little bit too thick. So I'll just take that back down to 5 points. So I'll just click away here, and you can see that the effect has been to add a dark stroke all the way around the shape here. Now if we wanted to do it on this piece, we could do that as well. I would choose Edit Copy, Edit Paste in Place. I will take this piece and move it right to the very bottom because we only want it to appear behind everything else. We don't want to affect the size of the stroke inside here, but we do want to affect it here. I'm going to target that particular shape, and I'm just going to increase its stroke size so that it matches the rest of the ice cream. And now we're going to add yet another stroke around the outside of this shape. So I'm going back to select my composite path, the path that is the overall shape. And as we did previously when we added another fill to our ice cream cone, we can add a second stroke. So I'm going to target in the Appearance panel this icon, which is Add New Stroke, and we add a second stroke on top of the first. Now because we're working in colors that are sort of pinks and oranges and browns, I'm going to select a sort of light tone that's going to work with those colors, and I want this to be the stroke color and I don't want any fill. So let's just go and do this as my stroke. Now at the moment we've got a 5-point stroke. Let's just see where it is. Well, the stroke is on the center of the shape and we want it to be on the outside of the shape. In fact, we want it to be outside the current black stroke that we have, but we'll organize that in a minute if it doesn't work. And we want it to be quite considerably wider. So I'm just going to widen this stroke. And because I think this is a bit dark, we can also change down the opacity of the stroke so that it's partially transparent. And we do that by first locating the stroke that we want to affect, which is this pinky brown color, and we open its flyout triangle and select its opacity. We don't want to select the overall path's opacity because that will affect our black stroke, and we don't want to affect the black stroke. We just want to make this stroke semi-transparent. So I'm just going to open up that panel and just make this stroke a little bit transparent. And you can see that our black stroke is, if I just click away, the black stroke around this shape is not correct. So let's go back and select it and let's move it to the top. And that puts it on top of the brown stroke. So in this sort of layer at the very bottom, we've got a black stroke and then a transparent pinky brown stroke, which is much larger than it is, but placed below it so that the black stroke is over the top. Now we can go ahead, since we've completed this shape, we can go ahead and rotate it. First of all, we'll need to select it and group it so that everything gets rotated together. So I'm going to choose Object, Group. And having done that, we can now rotate the object, and everything that is part of it is rotated with it. If we didn't group it, things would start to really move and not in an attractive way. Control or Command 0 to see the shape, the final shape, a little more clearly in the screen. So there's how to create a kawaii ice cream shape in Illustrator. I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial. Look out for more of my video tutorials here on my YouTube channel, and consider subscribing to my channel and you'll be alerted when new videos are released. And visit my website at projectwoman.com where you'll find more tips, tricks and tutorials on a range of applications including Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator and a whole lot more.